Um, okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, which will focus a little bit on the activities that we're carrying out in the INTERREG Alpine Space TranStat project, which focuses on the transition on mountain areas and mountain research. So welcome from my side. I'm Stefano Sala, and I manage the communication within the project. And I'm from the University of Milan UNIMONT Center, which is a center in the Alps, located in the Alps, and we dedicate our resources, let's say, to education, training, and research on focusing only on mountain areas. And I also welcome the lead partner, so Emanuelle from INRAE, that will present the project afterwards, and Raffaella Balzarini from INRAE, who manages the overall activities of the project. But first of all, I would give you a little bit of rules. So we ask you, if possible, to please keep your microphone closed. And we will have a Q&A session, so feel free to ask questions if you wish, also through the chat. And also feel free also to write in your original language. Of course, I mean French, Italian, sorry, there's someone with the microphone open, French, Italian, Slovenian, and German, and English as well. So feel free to write in the chat any potential questions, and we will have a session afterwards. So now I will leave the floor to Matteo Decostanzi, who represents the Joint Secretariat Alpine Space, who is the funding body of this project. So please, Matteo.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So if we can move to my first slide, I will just have a brief presentation of INTERREG Alpine Space, which is one of the many INTERREG programs. What is INTERREG, for who don't know? It's one of the key instruments of the European Union cohesion policy, supporting cooperation across border through the project funding. We have three main type of programs: cross-border, who, as the name suggests, focuses on border between countries, transnational cooperation programs, as Alpine Space works on wider territories. At the moment, in this financing period, we have 15 INTERREG transnational programs, and inter-regional programs who are much wider again on the span of territory, and focuses on the exchange of experience between local and regional actors. For example, INTERREG Europe is one is an example of inter-regional program. But let's dive in what Alpine Space do. So the program aim at financing cooperation project across the border of 7 European countries, as you can see from the map. And the aim is to tackle common transnational challenges, triggering and supporting the financing of projects that adopt and use joint transnational solution. The main aim are the integration of sustainable economic development, societal well-being, and preservation of alpine biodiversity. Apart from the financing of projects, Alpine Space contribute, let's say, to the discussion on the territory, providing a platform for exchange to bring stakeholders together, and contributing to the goals of the USAB strategy, the work of the Alpine Convention, and the implementation of the Territorial Agenda 2030. A little bit something about the cooperation area. As you can see, as I mentioned, 7 European countries, 5 of which are part of the European Union, and again, together with Switzerland and Liechtenstein. The area covers around 90 million inhabitants, a little less 88, and the main beneficiaries of the program are public authorities, but also institutions of higher education, enterprises, business support organization, NGO, and so on and so forth. Of course, you can find, I add the link to our website if you want to dive a little bit more in the topic on which Alpine Space works, and also the different type of projects that are financed, mainly classic projects and small scale projects. Now we can move to the second slide, just a brief overview of the priority of the program for this 7-year 2021-2027 of financing. The program decided to work on 4 priorities. The first one who focuses on climate resilience and preservation and enhancement of biodiversity in the Alpine region. A second priority which works on carbon neutrality and a circular economy. The third priority focuses more on innovation and digitalization, again, to orient the region to a much greener approach. And the fourth priority works on the improvement and the enhancement of cooperation and better management of the Alpine region. Now I will conclude just with a brief overview of the specific objective 1.1, which is one of the 2 specific objectives of priority 1, which wants projects to contribute and to focus on the promotion of climate change adaptation, risk prevention, and disaster management. Of course, we all know, and we all face the more and more the effects of climate change on the Alpine nature, but also on economy and on society. With this specific objective, the program wants projects to propose joint management approaches, find and test a network-based solution, improve climate services, and so on and so forth. I wanted to focus a little bit more on this specific objective because this is the objective also on which TranStat wants to contribute. And I thought it was interesting to have a little bit of overview, also because how can I say, mountain resorts are part and a heart of the Alpine economy, and so helping them to face these challenges is the heart of TranStat project. But I will leave you to a better presentation of the project, and I will listen with much interest to the rest of the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Matteo. And I will now, sorry, Emanuelle, leave the floor to Emanuelle, George, and Raffaella Balzarini, who will present a little bit the project. Please.
Yes, thanks, Matteo, and thanks, Stefano. As a lead partner, I'm very happy to welcome you for this webinar. And behind the screen, there are also all the partners of the TranStat project. And now with Raffaella, we want to give you a global overview of the project, its content, the activity we plan to do, and also the way in which you, observer or potential observer, you can be involved in the 3 years project. So as its name indicates, TranStat deals with the ski resorts, their dynamics, and also their transition capacity faced to the global change. And I will underline 3 pillars of our TranStat project. The first pillar is the target, or concern the target of the project. That is to say, we want to work on ski resort and their dynamics. And for us, ski resort couldn't be considered as some island, but on the contrary, we address the ski resort taking into account their relationships with wider areas, their interlands. And you can see on the schema the different levels or scale we want to take into account in the project. The first is the ski area with, for example, the ski lift operator, the dynamics and the stakes, and also the scale of the ski resort, which is a complex ecosystem with a lot of stakeholders. For example, you could see ski school, restaurants, equipment renters, and so on. So we want to work on this scale of ski resort, but also at the scale of mountain resort, which is a wider area where we can find agriculture, forest, and all over economic sectors and so on. So for us, the target of TranStat project is what we call mountain resort. And the project developed a specific work with 10 mountain resorts located in 5 countries, Slovenia, Switzerland, Italy, Austria, and France. And these 10 mountain resorts will be considered as our living lab during all the project. The second pillar, the second pillar concerns the notion of transition. And this notion is a widely used notion, but in fact, we observe that there is a lot of debate around this question of transition, and also it refers to various meaning, because, for example, the transition could be radical with the end of the ski area management, for example, faced to the climate change and the reduction of snow cover, or the transition could be more progressive. And one important point in the project is that there are no transition models. There are no references for the mountain resort. So in this sense, the project aims to describe, to analyze the transition processes for all the mountain resorts. And these mountain resorts are faced to the global change. We think about the climate change, the real estate evolution, the change in touristic demand. And so they have to define their own pathway, their own transition pathway, and using their own resources. And so we need to design adapted transition paths for each mountain resort. And for that, we consider we want to support mountain resorts because there are no transition references in order to elaborate and to build a desired future, taking into account all the challenges and all the resources that the mountain resort could implement. And the last pillar, thanks. The last pillar concerns the methodology that we want to implement during the TranStat project. And the first point is to implement a participatory and inclusive approach with all the 10 mountain resorts. For us, we want to integrate all but we want also to take into account the inhabitants and the tourists in order to have a more global, inclusive approach. And with this all stakeholders, we want to implement also a systemic approach with all the dimensions, economic one, but also environment, like Matteo explained, with nature-based solution, and also social dimension, because we know that in a lot of mountain territories, we can observe spatial or social inequalities. So with this approach, for us, the last point is to create a physical and digital network of the 10 mountain resorts with all the stakeholders who will be involved in building their transition path. And the network is also the opportunity to share their experience between the mountain resort, to share their stakes, but also to share their solution. And it could be also after the opportunity to disseminate the solution. Raffaella, I will explain deeply the structure of the TranStat project, especially with the activity we plan to do.
Yes, thank you very much to all, and welcome from my side too. So the issue that Emanuelle presented are eyed up by TranStat, which organizes its work in groups of goals, action, and production called work packages. So I try to change. It doesn't move. Okay, so
perhaps I can share my screen if you...
No, it's I don't know why it was okay. Okay, so just stop one moment and do it again. Okay. I think that's... No, it doesn't work anymore. It stops. I don't know. Stefano, you know why it stops?
I can try to share my screen if you want. Stop
okay.
you, and I will try. Sorry. It's okay?
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Yes, yeah. So let's start again. So as I said, we have organized the work in what we call work packages. And these are 3 of these work packages. So the first one, under the responsibility of the Austrian Academy of Science, has to develop a method to implement participatory approaches in the mountain research resorts. And this means being able to activate, to engage the representative of the community as operators, traders, inhabitants, and governors, so that they can be involved in the different stages of the process. The second one is under the responsibility of INRAE, and it will use scientific approaches to produce cross-diagnosis based on systemic analysis of business models, ecosystems, environment and biodiversity, and human practices of the mountain research. And with these insights, and so with a clear and accurate knowledge of its own resources and vulnerabilities, the stakeholders and the project partner will build together with specific tools scenarios of the desired and shared futures. The third one is under the responsibility of the Research Center of the Slovenian Academy of Science and Arts, and it will draw a set of the diversity of the process that have been set up in our mountain research and beyond, and will draw long-term solution and recommendation so that the public authorities may support the territories at different levels, so local, regional, and alpine one. All these activities will be shared and communicated by UNIMONT, which pilots the communication of the project over the 3 years of its duration. So the project has been launched in early 2023 and will be completed in the fall 2025. And the management is ensured by INRAE Lessem. Okay, next. So who will do this job? So the consortium is made of 11 partners, so scientists specialized in mountain issue according to different scientific domains, but also private and public agencies and policymakers. So for France, we have the leader partner, so INRAE Laboratoire Lessem, University Grenoble-Alpes, and la Région Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. For Italy, we have Unimont, l'Università di Milano e la Regione Lombardia. For Austria, we have the Academy of Science, the Austrian Academy of Science, with the Institute for Interdisciplinary Mountain Research, a consulting company, donc Alpes GmbH, and a development agency, EcoPlus. For Slovenia, we have the Research Center of the Slovenian Academy of Science and Art with the Anton Melik Geographic Institute and a regional development agency, RAGOR. And for Switzerland, we have the Applied Science, the University of Applied Science of the Grisons with the Institute for Tourism and Leisure. Okay, so the Living Labs are the mountain research that have joined our project as pilot sites in which we operate the 3 work packages. They are very different, either for the natural configuration, for example, altitude, exposure, valleys, or for the current business model, still all skiing or diversification of tourism or other, or also for their transition issue. And in few minutes you will hear about two testimonials of that. And the Living Labs commitment is not necessarily linked to a lack of snow, even if this factor is more and more widespread, but rather to their conviction that thinking about the transition in all its facets is today an urgent matter. So for France, we have Saint-Pierre de Chartreuse and Megève. For Italy, in Regione Lombardia, we have Mani Vaschi e Chiesa in Valmalenco. For Austria, we have Santa Corona e la Biosphere Grosses Wassertal. For Slovenia, we have Kraniška Gora and Rogla. And for Switzerland, we have not only one mountain resort, but a region, the region of Surselva. Okay, next one, please. So who is also involved in this project? So in an INTERREG project, we have what we call the observer. So these observers may provide a valuable expertise and support to the project and may play different roles as multipliers, policymakers, and local implementers. And observers contribute on a voluntary basis and are not eligible to the RDF support, so to the European fundings. We have to identify three main categories. So as you can see, public authorities such as ministry, regions, department, cantons, or mountain communities, companies, organization, agency, such as tourism agency or skilled companies and many others, or international institution, scientific or not. And this list is open. And if you are interested to become an observer, please do not hesitate to contact us. Okay, next one. So the project has planned events, and you will be updated about that with news, with summaries and overview. For instance, 3 workshops with the Living Lab will take place at the end of the main activities of the work packages, and will be a moment of discussion of exchange. So we have the first one that will take place in early May in Megève. Then next year we will have another Living Lab International workshop in Italy, and the last one will be in Slovenia in spring 25. And then we have other institutional or political meeting. But besides these events, we will organize meetings specially dedicated to the observers, in which the preliminary versions of the outputs will be presented and discussed with you, the observers, because your contribution, your experience will be very useful to improve them. In fact, the outputs are fed in an iterative way all along the project, and their final version will come out at the end of 2025. So we think we will propose the first one around this fall to discuss the Living Labs implementation method. Then in fall 24, after the diagnosis and scenario step to get a feedback from Living Lab experience and debate about their desired futures they have designed. And finally, in fall 25, we will meet to discuss about the policy brief and the potential action plans. So of course, we will communicate all this date, the periods before end. And we will have, for the moment, the way of communication is our website. And so I leave the floor to Stefano that will give you the information about how to visit the website. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Raffaella and Emanuelle. Yes, so in order to keep updated on our activities and the project outputs, please visit the website of which you find the URL in the bottom of the slide. We will put it in the chat in a few minutes as well. So please visit it. And if you have additional questions on the website, you find our contacts. So feel free to write to us and to ask us questions. So I see that there are, for the moment, no questions in the chat. So I would move on with the two examples, let's say, or the living labs that are involved in the project, and then we can open the floor for discussion. So we have two examples today that we'll present to you. One is from Austria, Sankt, and then the other one is from Megève in France. So I would leave the floor to the first speaker, so Jakob from Sankt, and apologies for my pronunciation of your place. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I will present Sankt. Next slide, please. Yes, Raffaella already said or showed it on the map that Sankt is in the south of Vienna in Lower Austria. It's about a 1 hour drive from Vienna. Due to the geographical location in the east of Austria and on the edge of the Alps, we have already taken some fundamental measures away from a classical ski area and towards to a year-round area. And as a result, the Washington Post took notice of us and has already published an article describing how we are preparing for a future with little to no snow. Next slide, please. Some general informations about Sankt. The mountain railways range from an altitude of 840 meters in the valley to 1,039 meters on the mountain. So as you can see, it's very low. There are two major companies who run the ski area. It's on the one hand, it's the Bergbahn and Sankt GmbH, and which owns the lifts, and on the other hand, it's the management Familienarena Publike Wechselland GmbH, which operates the lifts and the attractions. Next slide, please. We already, as I said, we already did some critical measures. For example, the most important was in 2011. The operation of the ski area was no longer financially profitable. So therefore, the step was taken to dismantle most of the lifts. The circle is not showing in the presentation, I'm sorry, but we dismantled everything but the small part in the south or down below at the number 3. Normally there should be a circle, but anyway, it's at the number 3 down below. Next slide, please. Yes, there it is. That's left of the ski resort. Everything else was dismantled. So we specialized in families, very much in families, both in winter and summer. I have some pictures for you on the next few slides. So as you can see, the lifts are used in summer and in winter. They are modified so they can be used at both times. The drag lift, next slide, please. Is just another picture of the children. Yeah, as I said, we do most of our attractions for children and families, but we also have some downhill mountain bike tracks, and the drag lift was modified so you can use it as a climbing aid for downhill mountain bikes and for the bobsleds in winter. Next slide, please. You can see not just skiing and snowboarding, so other sports and activities. This is how the area looks today in an overview. As I said, it's very small that's left, but this was critical, and we had to do it because the ski area wasn't profitable anymore. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's an overview in the winter, and the next slide is an overview in the summer, as you can see. And on the next slide, you see that the number of visitors in the summer is increased over the last few years. People come from further away. Most of the, so it's Lower Austria, Vienna, Upper Austria, and Hungary most of the time. And this is due to the constant expansion of our summer attractions. We make most of our visitors come in summer, and that's, as I said, that's the, I don't know how to say it, but yeah, we took the steps for summer tourism and away from winter tourism, so it's the result of these measures. On the next slide, we have, should be a video, but we deleted it, so yeah, that's perfect. Oh, yeah. This is that are our 3 reasons we had heard to be successful. We tried to do an optimal use of our resources and our infrastructure. We tried to have common standards and rules of ski in our ski resorts and our mountain resorts, for example, marketplace and sustainability. And we tried to have rapid prototyping, product development and pricing. We try to have low threshold and high ceiling activities, so for beginners and for advanced people. Next slide, please. For example, we have our Winter Navi. It's an online marketplace, or a website where you can get all the information about the ski areas in Lower Austria. So, for example, snow conditions, occupancy, and open facilities, and so on. This is particularly important for us because we have a very large number of daily tourists, and they get their up-to-date information from this website and spontaneously decide whether to visit us or not. And next slide, last slide, finally the reasons why we are participating in TranStat, although we have already taken some measures. Above all, the international network is very important for us. Guidelines for a transformation in our other ski areas, because we own 4 other ski areas in Lower Austria, very interesting for us. The transfer of knowledge between the participants is a great advantage, and we are very much looking for innovative processes for future-oriented development. So that was my last slide. Thanks for the attention, and yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jakob, for the presentation. And then, of course, I remind you that if you want to ask questions, please write them in the chat. Then I will pass on the word to the second example in Megève in France, to Maroulène Cordier. So please, you're welcome to present.
Thank you very much. So I will give a short presentation on Megève. If we can move on to the first slide, please. So this is just to visualize where Megève is in the French Alps. As you can see, it's close to Switzerland, close to the Mont Blanc, and close to Italy as well. It's about 200 kilometers from Lyon, 66 kilometers from Geneva in Switzerland, and not far from Torino through the tunnel that runs underneath the Mont Blanc. In terms of population, it's because Megève is first a village, it's about 3,000 population inhabitants all year round. Because of the increase we get during the tourist season, we're overclassified as if we were a town of 40 to 80,000 inhabitants. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Megève has made the French ski history. Just to give a bit of surrounding, the area has been populated since about the Middle Ages. the thousands. And it was an agricultural village, but tourism started not with skiing, but it started first as a pilgrimage area. So there was a history of people coming in to Megève because there's a Calvary. But the orientation toward modern tourism and skiing began in the 1920s when the Baroness Noémie de Rothschild discovered Megève and started to implement some infrastructures in Megève. So on the slide now you have like a few historical landmarks with regards to skiing. Okay, we talk about the golf, which is interesting because it preceded the cable car, and we've had a golf course since 1923. The first hotel, it was in 1924, so from the Baroness, the Rothschild Baroness, it was the first hotel. Then we had, I'm trying to skip through so I don't read everything, but interestingly enough, we had the first cable car in the history of France in 1933, and then some like Olympic and world famous skiers from Megève, etc. throughout our history. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Nowadays, the tourism strategy of Megève is also built on this reality of history and the fact that it is a village. There's been a concern to make sure that it's not just a ski resort, but it's a four-season mountain village and that there's activity all year round. The interest is that it's good for tourism, it's good for diversification, and it's good for keeping our local population. Just to give a couple of figures very quickly, it's not on the slide. We have a way to monitor how many people come to Megève in summer and the winter, but we don't measure right now between spring and autumn. But just to give an idea, the ratio is 70% tourists in winter and 30% in the summer. And just to give an idea, if we take so the figures we get from the hotels, the rental of apartments and everything, in winter last year, we had over 1 million nights booked by tourists. And in summer, it was 464,000, just to give an idea. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our Alpine domain. So we, in Megève, it's a bit particular because we have two companies operating the skiing areas. And our domain is split over 3 main areas. 2 of them connect, and the third one can be connected throughout the village, but it doesn't connect this way. I mean, directly through lifts. As you can see, the elevation, just to give an idea, is from about 1,100 meters and 2,350 meters. So that's, you can start skiing from the village up to this elevation. We also have a Nordic domain, which has been labeled. And so we have 45 kilometers of path in the Nordic domain. It's public, it's operated, yeah, it's operated by the city. Thank you. Next slide, please. So one of the strong points in entertaining tourists and bringing them here, but also for the year-round activities of other villages, I mean, within the area, is what we call Le Palais, which is a huge sports facilities. We brag to say it's the biggest sports facilities in the Alps. It operates all year round with indoor and outdoor swimming pools. Obviously the outdoor swimming pool, not in the winter, but we have swimming pools all year round. We have tennis courts, we have an ice rink, we have a fitness center, we have a climbing wall, and it's also a congressional center. And it has been renovated and is being renovated at the moment, just to make sure we can cater to year-round business. And it was a visionary, actually, I think it was built in the 60s, 1960s, 70s, with this idea that we could provide activities throughout the year. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Just a quick data sheet. I will not read all the figures, but this is to show that we have over 32 hotels, including 5 5-star hotels. We have 135 restaurants. We have 13 or more craftsmen. There's a lot of craftsmanship still present in the village. We can cater to the tourist activity. This is what you can see on the left-hand side of the slide. And then on the right-hand side, We just wanted to show that it is indeed a village that has a local population that lives here and it doesn't empty after the winter. It just, it exists. We have a health center, we have schools, we have a retirement home, we have general administrative services. If we can move on to the next slide, please. The current challenges we have identified with regards to what may be at stake with the project here is that we are experiencing climate change. We can witness the snow condition and quantity evolving throughout the years. We are facing limited water supply and it has impact on the activity. We've also been facing a decrease in local population. It's hard to retain the local population and we want to retain the local population. Also because it's what makes it attractive. Megève is known to be a village in the landscape of French Alps. It's been known to be a village and this is part of its charm. So it's important to continue with this. If you take it from the tourist angle, if you take it from the local population angle, if it decreases, we have fewer services, which is also a main impact and it just interacts from one side to the other. There's actually new expectations from both local and tourist populations in terms of sustainable development and energy management. It is actually a request that we get from tourists and local population. And finally, Megève has been taking a strong commitment to sustainable development and societal responsibility. And so this is something we want to implement on a daily basis and for the future. Next one, please. That will be the final slide. Why TranStat? The two main points is that we can see that we will benefit from a scientific and systematic methodology that will give us an analysis of our situation, so that's diagnosis. And we are looking forward to having like tailored recommendations for what we are facing. And we're also very keen on the fact that the methodology will mobilize all stakeholders in the territory. And so we think that it will be, the ownership will be good from this methodology for what the recommendations will be in the future. And then the second main point is that we appreciate the opportunity to integrate the network of European resorts to share and learn on best practices and experiences, because we do believe that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, as we say in French, but we can learn from one another. That's it for us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot. And thanks to both of you for the interesting presentations. So now I would open the floor to possible questions from the participants. I see already in the chat that there is a question that was already answered, but I would ask maybe Jakob to answer it again via Zoom. So the question was, what, where or are your most important challenges in your transformation to date?
Yeah, the hardest part was to make the decision to dismantle the majority of the ski lifts. The people or inhabitants of Sankt of the village very much doubted us that this was that it is necessary, but we had to do it, and we had a strong resistance of the population in the village. Yeah, but fortunately the situation has changed. People recognize that summer tourism can be also viable, and it's in fact more viable today than winter tourism in Sankt. So hotels and restaurants and all the population I would not say happy, but they faced the decision and they see that they can take advantage of it nowadays.
Thanks a lot. I don't know if any other participant has any questions to either the two pilots that we presented or the lead partner concerning the project itself. Feel free to ask any questions. Maybe I would have one from Megève. from my side. So I would ask because of course in your presentation you focused a lot on the summer and winter tourism. I wanted to understand if you also saw a change or a shift in the off season. So in the seasons that are in between the summer and the start of the winter season, as well as in the spring season. So do you see a lot more people coming to your area in these months, or do you not see any difference? Because to me, that's I think what within the project will be assessed as well is the fact that we need to have tourism all year round in mountain areas and not just concentrated in a few months. So I think that could be interesting to hear from you.
We do have people coming in what most people would call the off season, whether it's in the spring or in the autumn. One fact that is interesting to know, I don't have the figure right now, but we have a lot of secondary residents here. So they will also come and go depending on what animation or events we can organize, and also depending on the weather. So we realize this. We've seen more people coming. I mean, the mountain areas, at least in France, has become more and more popular. And I think especially in the last years, we've seen people coming to get, in the longer summer period, maybe September, June. So yes, there's an extension. There's actually a policy. I mean, it's, a virtuous circle, we feel, that people are willing to come, but we need to make sure when they come during these moments, they find what they want. So we strive to make events during spring and autumn. We strive to work with our professionals so that hotels are open, restaurants are open, and this all goes together. And as we work on this, I think we can see an increase in population. But right now, the tools that we do have, the observatory that we have, does not take into account these periods. We've asked them to actually continue in September because they would stop at 31st of August, so we could not follow what was going on. But we should have more figure. Maybe at the end of the project, we can actually show something in an increase. But what is very interesting is that if you take into account, for example, we have a big event during the All Saints break. It's something built around gastronomy, and it has been triggering a lot more visitors and people coming, booking for stays because it's becoming popular and popular. So yes, we can see an increase. There's a will, but we have to activate it throughout our policy.
Thanks a lot. Yes, that's what I was thinking as well for our Italian pilots, because we live the same situation. And I think one of the main challenges, if you ask me, is also to discuss with the hotel owners and the rest of the economic tissue, let's say, because of course we're used to close in the off season. And I mean, because we as a university, we're located in nearby ski resorts, so we see how this works and how it is done. I don't know if there are any other questions. Please feel free to ask them either via the chat or to intervene, because otherwise we will close. We still have 10 minutes left, so I would say that it could be valuable to have a bit of a discussion. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I don't know if Emanuelle or Raffaella, if you want to say a few more closing sentences, and yeah.
No, thanks a lot for your presence today to this first webinar. The goal is to present and to give this overview, but as Raffaella explained, we plan to have some events with you, observer, to exchange about our deliverable at different period, but don't hesitate to contact us if you want to have more detail about the project and especially about our national context with the Living Lab. So it's the opportunity, and thanks a lot for your presence.
There is one, sorry, Emanuelle, there is one question now in the chat. So
yeah.
Since we have 10 minutes left, I would actually ask it. Maybe to both of the ski resorts. So it goes back to the fact that we have longer seasons. So Catherine asks, how do residents accept the longer seasons? Are there any new challenges arising? I'm thinking about availability of staff, etc. So I would ask this to both of you, even though I know that Sankt Corona focuses now more on the summer season, but I think it could be interesting. So maybe first Megève and then Sankt Corona.
Fabienne or Maroulène?
Yes, we can answer. So if I understand correctly, the question is, because we tend to extend the seasons, the main seasons, that would be winter and summer, is that a problem for the residents? Is that correct? Did I get this right? Okay. I don't think it's the main issue here because, well, locals who have their businesses are actually quite keen on having longer season. It's more business, not necessarily big businesses, so they can operate them. Yeah, a lot of locals have what we call double activities. So they'll have one in the winter, one in the spring, autumn, and summer. So it just, starts to shift like this. And actually, we do need to get more workforce during the seasons because the residents are not enough to cater to the needs of the different actors. So that's actually even better because the demographics and the reality of the work market in France is that it's better to get longer seasons than shorter ones, basically, if you're a ski resort or if you're just any kind of resort. So I don't think there's any, we've not had reports of, people being concerned about the longer seasons. On the contrary, I think people are more interested in, because it can help them maintain their businesses.
Thanks a lot.
And perhaps I can add that tourism is the main economic activity, and so there is this is a crucial dimension, and so without the tourism, I think the resident could imagine also the Megève future like this. So I think it's a crucial point of the functioning area.
Yes, it's correct. We cannot measure actually what is the part of tourism income towards the all of the income, but it's a big part of it. So definitely there would be fewer business opportunities, lots fewer business opportunities and income generating activities for locals if there was less tourism.
Thank you. I would ask the same question to Jakob, and also we have an additional question asking how did you deal with the residents who opposed the change that you had to deal with, and how was the situation approached? So did you engage with the local stakeholders in this process, or were they aware of the plans?
Yes, of course, they were aware of the plans. We had workshops, we had information evenings, and we did a lot with the mayor of the village, so they got a lot of informations. But the resistance was high, as I said. But we imagined that we said, as we expected the resistance, so we dealt with it, I think, good, but not good enough for the people of Sankt Corona. To the off seasons or the longer seasons, I don't think that the people of Sankt Corona see a negative side to longer seasons, because tourism is #1 business in the region. So because of that, there are many jobs in the region. So no, longer seasons are a good thing in Sankt Corona. Is there any? Yeah.
And perhaps about the question of how do we deal with the resident who oppose the change. This is the goal of our participatory and inclusive approach to integrate also integrate the diversity of position to the future of the mountain resort, and not only to focus on the core economic development model around tourism, but also to integrate other view, other representation of the future of the mountain resort. And this is the goal of the WP1, in order to have this participatory and inclusive approach, in order to take into account the diversity of the future representation by stakeholders.
Thank you, Emanuelle and Jakob. Actually, I have a question for you now, Emanuelle. So we have Vincenza, who asks, are you planning to include in the study the presence of internet connectivity and its easy access as an element to measure?
In fact, during the work with the Living Lab, and Raffaella explained, the WP2 is dedicated to diagnosis and also scenario. And to elaborate this scenario, we want to integrate also the factor of change, and especially a diversity of factor of change. And we know that for mountain resorts, the connectivity, the internet connectivity will be possibly a factor of change and a factor of increase or of change in the mountain resort. Even if in the partnership we are not specialists, or we are not a specific expertise about internet connectivity, but for us it could be a factor of change or a point to improve for the future of mountain resorts. So it depends on the Living Labs, and we want to co-build with the Living Lab, depending on their resources or also their factor of vulnerability, to integrate their own situation. And in this context, internet connectivity could be a factor of change or a point to improve in the mountain resort. But we don't plan to measure this internet connectivity, or to have a sort of data about this. It's not planned in the project. I don't know, Jan, if you want to add something about the WP2 and the place of this factor of change, but
maybe that's something that we could consider in the diagnostics, but only in terms of information, and not necessarily sort of to any action points for that. It really depends on the Living Labs.
Okay, thanks a lot to Emanuelle and Jan as well. So I think the last questions that we have right now, and I will pose it to Maroulène from Megève. So you already say that you're experiencing reduction in water supply, and how are you dealing with it? Because of course, artificial snowmaking requires a lot of water resources usage. So do you have any strategic plans, or do you have any strategy that you have adopted since?
So actually, the strain on water supply is pretty recent. I think it was in the last couple of years. So we're thinking about it. Something we have to integrate how to deal with it, because I don't think we foresaw it too much. There's already some restrictions, I think, in the periods of time when you can use, if you use like artificial snow. I'm checking with Fabienne, which is next to me. She's more knowledgeable than me on the topic. Yeah. So we have these pools where we gather water, natural elements, when it snows, when it rains, etc. And we're allowed to empty them once, but we cannot refill them, for example. And it's slowly moving, and I think we're thinking about it, but I think collectively the reflection, the thinking is going on. So I'm sorry, I cannot be more specific right now. It's really something we have to tackle together. We count on you all to drop on the experiences.
Thanks a lot for the answer. Yeah, I think in our situation in Italy as well, it has been a problem of the last years. I would say more than 3 or 4 years. But yes, this winter has been tragic, let's say, and so we will see how the future seasons look like, because of course this poses a lot of questions in terms of sustainability. So I do not see any other questions in the chat. If you have a last question, I ask you, feel free to intervene. If not, I would thank all of you for participating. Of course, as I said in the chat, you will find the YouTube recording of this webinar on the TranStat website. So feel free to share it and so on. And feel free to visit our website and contact us if you have any additional questions, or if you want to be involved as an observer, or if you want to ask the questions also to our speakers of today. Okay, so thank you, and it's Aperol time then.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
And see you soon. Bye.